Hello, practical law students, and welcome to this new week of material. So, this is the first lesson of three this week, and we're going to pick up with crimes against property. Now, last week we defined all those different terms: larceny, burglary, robbery. We talked about all these different crimes against property. We're going to pick back up with that. And really, today's focus is going to be on something called cybercrime, and we'll get to that in a second. But there are two other crimes against property I want to make mention of. All right. Now, remember, as you go through these, you're taking your own notes. I will try to give you a heads up with what I want you to take down specifically. All right. Now, receiving stolen property is a crime and is exactly what it says. Okay. You receive or buy property that you know or have reason to believe is stolen. That is what receiving stolen property is. So I would get that definition down. And to be honest with you, that's probably all you need to copy down on the screen. Now, people are going to say, I didn't know it was stolen. Okay. When I bought it or when I received it, I didn't know it was stolen. Well, it is implied by the circumstances. For example, if you buy something out of a trunk of an automobile, especially if you don't know the buyer, there's a good chance it could be stolen. So things like that can be used to discredit your defense. I didn't know it was stolen to begin with. All right. So you got to watch the circumstances. I know on the way to Bedford, this happened several years ago. On the way to Bedford, there was somebody that used to sell like cleaning products and detergent and stuff like that. Now, chances are they were probably getting involved in coupon fraud. Okay, namely they were buying all this stuff real cheap and then selling it at a higher price to make a profit. But that's another example. I would be hesitant to buy what looks like brand new products off the side of the road because you don't know if they are stolen or not. And saying I don't know if they were stolen or not is not always a good defense because it is implied by the circumstances. Now, like we've talked about with other forms of property crime, you can have felonies and misdemeanors with receiving stolen property. It is a felony if the property received is more than $100. It is a misdemeanor if the value is less than $100. Okay, so that can help, or that can also determine your punishment, the value of what you receive. If it's over 100, it's going to be a felony. If it's less than 100, it's going to be a misdemeanor. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is unauthorized use of a vehicle before we get to cybercrime, because we've got cybercrime to talk about too. Unauthorized use of a vehicle. Now, this is an interesting one because there are several types. Now, what I want you to copy down is this definition. It is a person unlawfully taking a motor vehicle without the owner's consent. Unlike what we talked about last week with larceny and burglary and robbery, you do not intend to deprive the owner of the vehicle. You want to borrow it temporarily. Okay, so if you're going to steal the car completely, then that's going to be robbery or larceny or something like that. Okay, since you're temporarily borrowing it, it's an authorized use of a vehicle. That includes joyriding. So for you teenagers out there, if you take your parents' car without their permission, they could have you charged with unauthorized use of a vehicle because you took it without their consent and you took it temporarily. Even if you're just using it to ride around town and have a good time with your friends and stuff like that, if they want to pursue it, they could charge you with unauthorized use of a vehicle. If the person intends to take the car permanently, the crime may be larceny or auto theft. We talked about that just a second ago. And here's another fun one, okay? If force is used, then that becomes carjacking. When a person uses force or intimidation to steal a car from a driver, that is a federal crime and is punishable of a sentence of up to life in prison. Okay, so if force is used to take the car, even if it is only temporary, okay, it's considered carjacking, it's a federal crime, and you could go to prison for life for it. Okay, because the idea, this is kind of like robbery. It's both crime against property and crime against the person because the person is actually driving the car at the time. Okay, and if you try to steal it that way, we're dealing with a federal crime and it's punishable of up to life in prison. Now, the last thing to talk about here in this lesson is cybercrime. And I'll be honest with you, we're going to paint very broad strokes with this. All right. There's only really one thing I want you to get down with cybercrime, and I'll tell you about it when we get to that slide. Cyber crimes are computer crimes. All right. That's why we have to talk about it, is because we're dealing with brand new technology. We're dealing with computers. It can involve computers themselves or computer networks to carry out criminal activities. Also, we're talking about traditional crimes like theft or stalking, but using computers to commit those traditional crimes. We're dealing with crimes that uniquely involve technology, like spamming, denial of service attacks like worms and viruses, or phishing, okay, which are attempts to illegally acquire personal information. All of these fall under this umbrella of cybercrime. A big one, and you don't hear about this one too much, but a big one several years ago was music piracy. People were downloading illegally, downloading albums, specific songs, things like that. And it even involves like making copies of CDs and distributing those CDs, even if you do it without pay. Okay, the fact that you are making an illegal copy, that is music piracy. All right, there was a uh, website called Napster that was famous for this. All right, people would go and they would pay like 99 cents or something like that, and they could download a song. But all these artists had not given them permission to do that. All right, so it was still considered musical piracy. The reason we are the reason we are concerned about things like music piracy is because it reduces legitimate sales. It harms the economic interests of songwriters and performers. And like we talked about with some of the crimes we mentioned last week, it's going to translate to higher prices for us, the regular consumer. Right? Because those performers and songwriters want to recoup any economic interest that they lose. If you are found guilty of music piracy, you're going to face steep civil fines and possible jail terms. Now, the reason I don't spend a lot of time with cybercrime is because it is constantly changing, because the technology is constantly changing. As the criminals get more precise, our laws have to get more precise. As criminals become more creative, our laws have to adapt to meet that, okay? So that's why we don't spend a lot of time talking about it, because chances are by the time we get to it, something else is going to change because something else comes along, okay? So we're going to go through these next couple slides really, really quickly. In fact, I'm going to put them up and we'll talk about them as we go through them, okay? We have tried to punish cybercrime, especially copyright violations. So we had the U.S. Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998, which made copying or copyrighted music illegal. I'm sorry, I should say, which makes copying of copyrighted music illegal, with the exception of making a copy for your own personal use. Okay, if you're making another copy for yourself, that's not because you bought the CD. That's not a copyright violation. However, if you make copies to give to other people, then we violate it. Okay. The idea is we want to protect copyright owners from unauthorized reproduction, adaptation, or distribution of the recording. Again, because we're trying to protect their livelihoods. Digital music rights are very, very controversial, and the laws governing them are often difficult to enforce. Now, besides copyright issues, another common internet crime is the transmission of obscene images, movies, and sounds. That's why we had the development of the Children's Internet Protection Act in 2000, which requires all public schools and libraries to purchase and install filtering software firewalls, on all their student accessible computers and establish certain internet safety policies or risk losing federal funding for technology. This is why you have to sign those computer use agreements at the beginning of each year. Okay. And that's why we also have firewalls and things like that in the school to prevent the transmission of obscene images, movies, and sounds. Now, the thing I want you to copy down is this. State and federal law enforcement units deal with computer hacking and intellectual property chip crimes, okay? To deal with these crimes, you have to have specially trained personnel who prosecute computer intrusions, copyright and trademark violations, and other internet crimes such as fraud, internet child pornography, etc., etc. So the bottom line is we have specially trained people that deal with these computer crimes. Right? And that's what I want you to get down. Be sure you get that down. The Internet Crime Complaint Center is www.ic3.gov. That's a place for you to report computer crimes if you feel that you are a victim of one. The U.S. Department of Justice works with judges, prosecutors, and investigators in countries around the world because we realize that because of the interconnectivity of different countries, we're going to have to work together to prosecute these crimes. And we also see a lot of collaboration between state and federal law enforcement officers to deal with this as well. Again, because of the nature of technology, we can cross state lines that much easier. Okay, so we see a greater collaboration between state and federal officers as well as world figures as well, judges, prosecutors, investigators, et cetera, et cetera. Now, a couple other pieces of legislation. You had the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of 1986, which provided the government with a specific law to prosecute hackers. Okay, that was when in its infancy, where not everybody had a computer. You had certain people that were trying to hack into government systems. This piece of legislation gave us more power to deal with those. It is now a crime to modify, destroy, or disclose information gained from unauthorized entry into a computer. That's why we have this piece of legislation. We also have the National Infrastructure Act of 1996, which makes it illegal to threaten to cause damage to a computer system, to coerce the owner to give the perpetrator something of value, kind of like blackmailing. We talked about that last week. Okay, so this is like the use of technology to blackmail somebody. All right, if you don't give me what I want, I will cause your computer system to crash. All right, this gives us some teeth to deal with threats like that. It is illegal to intentionally give or receive passwords that permit unauthorized access to systems. So you could be prosecuted under that if you just give somebody the password, because you're not supposed to do that. All right. Then a very, very controversial piece of the legislation is the U.S. Patriot Act of 2001. It was amended in 2006. This was done in the wake of September 11th because we were concerned about cyber terrorism. It is a very, very controversial act. Basically, people think it will give the government time or permission to look at your computer records if you are a suspected terrorist, okay, in order to try to prevent terrorist attacks. It is very, very controversial. Some people are very, very comfortable with it. Some people are opposed to it because they say it is a intrusion of your constitutional rights to freedom of speech, freedom of press, et cetera, et cetera. I'm one of those, I got to be honest with you. If I've got nothing to hide, I'm not concerned about it. Okay. I don't think the government is going to abuse its power. I think it's only going to use it for suspected terrorists for a specific amount of time. Okay. I don't think this is a way for the government to spy on you, although I understand people's fears and I won't criticize you if you're against this act. I'm just saying I'm not too worried about it. I think it's, in all honesty, I think it probably helps prevent some terrorist attacks. The last thing's here. It is illegal to copy software you have purchased. All right. That includes placing software on more than one computer without the publisher's permission. You violate copyright laws in that case. This is a problem for schools, which is why we have to buy site licenses for certain pieces of software. And believe it or not, if we get caught copying software onto more than the set amount of computers, school systems can be prosecuted. Okay. The reason is, once again, software publishers lose about $2 billion a year with people making illegal downloads. And if you are found guilty, you could possibly face jail terms or fines of up to $250,000, especially if you knew what you were doing is wrong. Okay. By the way, and now, in all honesty, are companies going to come after schools and stuff like that? Probably not. Another famous example is movies that you see in class and stuff like that. That FBI warning that always pops up there. Technically showing it in more than a home setting, the teacher could get in trouble. The saving grace is we do not charge admission for it. Okay, we bought the DVD And arguments are, what's the difference between showing it here or showing at your home where you have 25 people come over and watch it with you at your home? Okay. Um, but even that has something like that has brought um, charges of illegally copying material. Okay. So it's very, very interesting here. Copyright laws and stuff like that when it comes to cybercrime. All right, so sorry for that last tangent there. Um, just wanted to bring that up as well. So that does it for crimes against property. All right. Where we're headed for the rest of the week is we've talked about crimes against the person, we've talked about crimes against property. Now we're going to talk about defenses. What happens if you are charged with one of these crimes and you go to prison or you go to court? What defense do you have to offer in the trial against you?